I'm going to also say that we need to have our basic needs met. You know, that very sense of that we're safe, that we have housing, and that we're, you know, all those sort of basic tenets of life that are very predictable. Let me give you an example of this, though. When the floods in High River occurred, people have been displaced. People were displaced here for a very long time from that natural disaster, right? People were in hotels, they lost everything, their houses were flooded, they could never move back into the homes, they were stuck in hotel rooms or motels, their kids were displaced so that they didn't even get to school for quite a few months. There was a lot of really potentially traumatizing experiences all rolled up in the flood. But what I've heard is that the people who suffered least in that, or seemed to repair quicker from that, were the ones who were able to rebuild faster. Now, what was interesting for me is when I also heard about the Fort McMurray fires, and afterwards, what I heard was that some of the insurance companies, some of the banks, supposedly they loaded up some of these buses with their workers, with their insurance adjusters, with the bankers, so that not only could their cash machines be portable and moved around to get people in the shelters where people actually were once they were evacuated from the fires, but they were actually able to not only start their banking, but the insurance adjusters were able to activate the claims and get people already started on settling the claims. Now, you think about it. So after a major disaster, whether a flood or a fire or something else, do you need a psychologist or do you need an insurance adjuster? In a certain kind of crisis, there's a certain need for certain resources. It's that, what's the priority? And I'm going to argue that it's the insurance adjuster which is most important. That's the kind of magic of making people resilient. And notice the way I'm phrasing that. I'm talking about making people more resilient. You don't just come to somebody who's gone through a crisis and lost their home and say, I want you to feel hopeful for the future. You know, what you do is you create an environment around them. You create a positive work environment. You create a commitment to their well-being. I mean, I've heard that in your setting, you have access to a gym in some of your locations. Those are not superfluous things. Those are things that are making your work environment much more likely to promote resilience in you as individuals when times get tough. If I could keep going, yes, positive thinking is number 10. Absolutely, we need to be able to think positive thoughts. That's a big part of resilience. In combination, I'm going to argue, with all the other pieces that are facilitative of our opportunities. I mean, again, you don't just want to be thinking it. You want to be so that once you have a positive thought, the world says, yes, have a positive thought. Now we're going to actually help you to activate that, right? The example I also give, think about, you know that movie In Pursuit of Happiness with Will Smith? And he's a African American man trying to break into the stock, be a stockbroker or something in New York City. You can't totally say that it was just his positive thinking that got him that job. Because let's face it, that movie was made in the 90s? If that movie had been made in 1960, would it really have mattered if he was positive thinking or not? I mean, his race would have been a barrier, right? Sometimes there's real barriers out there. And this dynamic of positive thinking and the barriers we face, but the opportunities that are facilitated. And in a sense, you facilitate people's access to the resources they need to do well. Which brings me, I guess, let's face it, there are two other things we need. We need a basic sense of physical well-being. We need some physical health to do well. And of course, we also need financial well-being. When you take all 12 of these things and you put them together, they're going to bounce off each other. I mean, if you have lots of social relationships, maybe you don't need as much financial well-being. If you have a certain element of, if your identity is wrapped up in what you can do physically, then that's going to be kind of back and forth and intertwined as well. Think about what you really want is you want to have all 12 of these working together. So in a sense, the more challenges that we face, the more those dozen things are going to have an impact on your life. If things are going swimmingly well, that's great. But I will guarantee you that as stressors come into your life, if your job site all of a sudden goes through a traumatic change, if you're being asked to do more with less resources, you're going to see a change in the importance of different parts of that group of 12 things.